Good morning. I'm with Mike. I think we need to do away with vacations. We spent 7 days. There was 9 of us in one spot, all family. You know, I've said it before. Families like fish. After 3 days, they stink. You know, no. We had a good time, and like Brother Barrett prayed, every day I got up and I thanked God for the previous day. I mean, we did have a good time. We had no injuries, no deaths, ate good every day. I mean, the Lord was just merciful. And I tried to look for the good in that, besides being trapped with all of them and them with me. But what a merciful God we serve. We made it all the way back home, all in one piece. And brought a little more weight back with us. But I did miss y'all, and it's good to be with you again. We're going to continue in 2 Samuel chapter 18. Last time we looked at this about how the wood devoured more than the sword. And when I did pray this week, I found myself praying for the things that I can't control. Like, Lord, be merciful. Because He is in control. And a lot of times we forget that. We think we've got to do it. And here the battle was the Lord's. Like we look whenever the hailstones were cast down, when Joshua and them were doing battle. God's in control of this. And we should, as it's been pointed out in the past couple of weeks, rely on His promises and not His providence. His promises. And we're going to look here, we're going to pick this up in verse 9 here. As we look, the battle, listen, the battle's scattered, as we saw all over the place. You've got men here who are not experienced warriors battling David's men who are experienced warriors. David's men had spent years running from Saul in the brush. And Absalom and his men were a bunch of palace dwellers. We call them snowflakes today, if you will. You know, they sit there all day with their phone, figuring out how they would do it. But when it came time to do it, they couldn't execute it. And David's men have just, in the Lord's hand is with David, the anointed. God preferred David because God preferred David and not Absalom here. Listen, we need to make sure we're on His side and not trying to drag Him on our side. That's what these men of Israel did here. They tried to drag the Lord over to Absalom's side. And in verse 9 here, and Absalom met the servants of David, and Absalom rode upon a mule, and the mule went under the thick boughs of a great oak, and his head was caught hold of the oak, and he was taken up between the heaven and earth, and the mule that was under him went away. When I was a young man, one of the messages I heard by Lester Roloff was, and the mule walked on. About how your sin will leave you hanging. How your sin will, and it'll go on. And it'll leave you right. Sin will cost you more than you ever wanted to pay. It'll keep you longer than you wanted to stay. It's all over now. And in the next verse here, and a certain man saw it and told Joab and said, Behold, I saw Absalom hanged in an oak. And Joab said unto the man that told him, And behold, thou sawest him, and why didst thou not smite him there to the ground? And I would have given thee 10 shekels of silver and a girdle. And the man said unto Joab, Though I should receive 1,000 shekels of silver in mine hand, yet would I not put forth my hand against the king's son. For in our hearing the king charged thee and Abishai and Ittai, saying, Beware that none touch the young man, save the young man Absalom. Otherwise, I should have wrought a falsehood against mine own life. For there is no matter hid from the king, and thou thyself wouldest set thyself against me. I want to bring out this morning Joab's testimony. Not long after we come here, we went to another service and come back, and I was telling Mike and the men we were standing over here about, they did testimony Sunday. Mike said, we ain't doing that here. And I agree with him. And I'd often thought that for years. You can't give your own testimony. It's a conflict of interest. But somebody else will give your testimony. What's Joab's testimony here? His own men don't trust him. Do our brothers and sisters in Christ, can they trust us? What is our testimony? See, I can't give my testimony, but I bet John could give mine. Or Kim. Let's get Kim to give mine. She's known me a long time. That ought to get good. I'm going to leave when she starts because it's going to get good. But what is our testimony? This man here would not do what he needed to do because he knew his leader was mischievous. Now, what is Joab's testimony? The problem with Joab is the servant's way here was not the king's way. The servant's way was not the king's way. Over and over and over, Joab had took matters into his own hands and done it his way. David gave him an order here. Did he follow it? In the next verse, we'll see that he didn't. In chapter 3 of this same book, David met with Abner, and they agreed to a truce. Joab came back and found out about the truce, and he accused David of being misled. So what does he do? He lures Abner back and kills him himself. Kills him himself. Let's flip over there, chapter 3. Second Samuel chapter 3. Listen to what David said about Joab's actions here in verse 39. And I am weak this day, though anointed king, and these men, these sons of Zeruiah, be too hard for me. The Lord shall reward the doer of evil according to his wickedness. There's Joab's testimony. Now listen, you know why we want to fight? You know why Joab wanted to take matters into his own hands? He thought it was his duty to put David on the throne. David said, though I'm anointed king, I'm still anointed king even though they've done what they've done. Listen, it's not our job to put Jesus on the throne. What should my testimony be? That I bear one another's burdens. That I am meek and lowly. What should my testimony be? What did Peter say about using our conversion as a cloak of malice? I want to fight. I want my way, not the king's way. Again, going back to telling the king how to run his kingdom. See, we quote this a lot, and I've heard it said, he's going to make the enemy his footstool. Well, does that mean he demolishes them? Does a footstool help you? Does a footstool help you? So there's a conversion there from an enemy to a footstool, isn't there? I want us to close with John chapter 4. This is a familiar story here, the woman at the well. Jesus asked her for some water. She said, I'm a Samaritan, and you're a Jew, and you're asking me for water? And he told her, he said, if you drank of the water that I have, you wouldn't thirst anymore. And she asked him for some of that water. He said, go call your husband, and you all come here. And she said, I don't have a husband. And he said, true. You've had 5 husbands, and the man you're living with now is not your husband. Now you think Jesus is talking to this kind of woman. We wouldn't even dirty our hands with this. That's our testimony. I'm not going to stoop that low. But what was her testimony of Jesus when he got through? Look in verse 28. The woman then left her water pot. Now, how valuable was that water pot? But she found something more valuable. Have you left your water pot behind? Then the woman left her water pot and went her way into the city, and saith to the men, Come see a man that judged me for everything I'd done wrong. Come see a man that condemned me. No, come see a man that told me all things that ever I did. Is not this the Christ? She was so comforted. Listen, he called her out on what she'd done wrong, but he wanted to fix why she was doing them wrong. Because there was a thirst in here. Do we know how to point people to the well where they won't thirst anymore, or are we too aggravated because they're thirsty? The king's way versus the servant's way. I'm afraid we're all a bunch of Joabs in most cases. We handle the battle our way. And nobody trusts us. Because we're not about the king's business, we're about our business. Hey, you can't trust him. Hey, you can't trust her. I hope my testimony someday is where if you're looking for help, go see Brother Clay. He can tell you about a man that told him everything he's ever done. Even some things y'all don't know about. What a testimony. Do you think she felt condemned? In her heart, she probably did, but she felt love there too, didn't she? See, there's a right way to handle this, and there's a wrong way to handle it. There's a cloak of malice. Hey, she brought the whole town back to see this man that told her she had 5 husbands, and the one she was living with now wasn't her husband. She went and got the whole town and brought them back to see this guy. Remember the other lady when he wrote the other fellow's girlfriend's name in the ground, and he stood up and said, all right, where are your accusers? And she said, they're all gone. He said, neither accuse I. Go your way and sin no more. That ought to be what? That ought to be our testimony, not the cloak of malice. I mentioned about being with family all week. The biggest problem with being with family all week is you want them to be your way. So I have tried to learn to love them in spite of myself. And I'm afraid when we're dealing with the world, when God is converting the enemies to his footstool, I want to get in the way. Was Saul God's enemy before he became Paul? What if Stephen had lashed out? There's something Saul saw that day that he couldn't get away from it. Let's let our light so shine before men that when they give our testimony, it's a good one. I love y'all. It's good to be back with you. May the Lord bless you.